A couple of days ago, I actually made a couple of videos where I graded how I thought every AFL team went in the 2024 AFL draft. And one team's grade I did actually got a couple of comments from you guys saying that I actually went a bit too low and I could have gone a bit higher. And the team some of you guys are talking about does happen to be the West Coast Eagles, where I, of course, gave them a B+, which, now that I think about it and have been reading your comments and have had a lot of thoughts and have done a ton of research, I kind of agree that I feel like I might have been a little bit stiff with that grading, and I actually think not only could it be in the, of course, A category now, but there was a lot of really good things going on, and I've done a lot more research, and I'm thinking I've got to make a video on this because I feel like a lot of other people out there not only need to be educated on what I think is a very good draft by the West Coast Eagles, but what I believe is a very, very underrated free agency by the West Coast Eagles. Now, again, before I do get into all of that and more, if you haven't already, there is still a decent amount of you guys who watch these videos who are not yet subscribed. So, of course, it would mean a lot to me if you guys could, go and leave a like on this video as well as subscribing to the channel. Of course, it would go and help me a lot. It would cure me of my KFC coma that I'm in right now. You guys probably have no idea what that means, but I'm actually taking like 2 whole weeks off takeaway. Can you believe it? 2 weeks off takeaway. Look, that might not seem like much, but for a fat ass like me, that's like about four years. They say like every human year is 7 years in like dog weeks, or dog years, I should say. Well, every week without takeaway is like 2 years for a chunky monkey like me. So, it is what it is. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel to help me with this KFC coma. It would, of course, mean a hell of a lot if you know what I mean. But the West Coast Eagles had a really, really good draft, starting off with the 16th overall pick, where they were able to pick up 191 centimeter midfielder Beau Allen, who is, again, a midfielder slash defender, a player who was really highly regarded going into the draft night, who I think was mentioned by a lot of people could actually be a player that Richmond were really kind of debating on who they should maybe take a pick 7 with. Not only were they looking at Beau Allen, but of course Josh Smiley. They decided to go with the Smiley pick and realized we've probably picked up too many tall midfielders here, so we won't take Beau Allen with pick 11, but it would have definitely been up for consideration, and any player in the top 10 in this year's draft should hopefully be a future star. Of course, it is said to be one of the deepest drafts in AFL history, if not the deepest draft. So a guy like Beau Allen potentially being pick 7 at one stage, but falling to pick 16 for the West Coast Eagles is a tremendous, massive W for them. And the fact is, he's from WA as well. So this is a really good pick by them, who I think will automatically come into their 23 and play a really big pivotal role in not only, I think, the midfield for the Eagles, but I could see him very much starting off as a half-back, especially with how this Eagles team is building a lot of depth in their midfield, again, adding Harley Reid, Jack Graham, and Liam Baker over the last couple of years, etc. I wouldn't be surprised if he actually starts off, playing some half-back, which we know he can very easily do as well, and then also chipping in the midfield. So great pick by them. They get a top 10 guy at pick 16. You also move on where they got another steal, getting Job Shanahan at pick 30. Of course, was passed on by a ton of AFL teams. Again, I think the reason is because a lot of people are saying he doesn't have necessarily the most potential in the draft. So I think a lot of AFL teams expect some of the other key forwards to eventually get better than him. But the thing is, we know he can play against grown adults, and he literally kicked 5 goals, against another VFL team while he played for Essendon. So this guy is proven, and I think he's another guy who could automatically jump in to that 23. And if I'm going to be honest, I would say he's probably already better than Jack Darling. So you not only get a younger replacement who's like 15 years younger, but you get a guy who I think is literally like already better than Jack Darling, which is, it's funny to see. And I think people forget Darling only averaged like a goal per game this year. And North thought, yep, let's sign this man and he can be our future with Nick Larkey. But West Coast, they stuck to their guns and they, of course, took Shanahan at 30, which has been a massive steal. Another guy in the last draft that I'm actually going to talk about does happen to be Tom Gross, who got taken at pick 46, 181 centimeter midfield / forward player. Again, I think to be another steal in this draft. I believe Richmond were probably looking at him in the 20s, and he actually trained with the Tigers over the off-season, so I think he was a player that a lot of teams were looking at. The issue with Tom Gross is that he wants to be an inside midfielder, but he just unfortunately has never been able to be good enough to be an inside midfielder when it got to that under 18s level. But the thing is, he was actually chucked onto the wing, where I believe he averaged like 20 disposals and a goal a game, and played some really phenomenal football, where I think that hopefully he's kind of given up on that inside midfield dream and is starting to look at this wing thing pretty serious. Because I think if he does, the Eagles could use another wingman or two, and they could quite literally have found one. And I think he could be an early player who contends for that round 1 position as well. So realistically, I think the West Coast Eagles had a phenomenal draft where they got not only 3 steals, but 3 players who I think could very well jump straight into their round 1 team and really put in a good effort. I don't think Tom Gross will, but I definitely think Bo Allen and Job Shanahan will both very likely be chances to play round 1. The thing is that I hate that people are discrediting is the fact that they had an underrated offseason. Now, the Jack Graham signing is an interesting one. They brought in this midfielder for free who should be going into his prime. The realistic thing is, every Richmond fan like myself knows that Jack Graham had a terrible 2024 season. He was flat out bad and probably shouldn't have been in the team, especially considering they were the worst team in the league and this dude literally was one of the worst players. So some of you guys might be thinking, why did the Eagles go and sign Jack Graham? Why is this a good idea? And the fact is that Jack Graham has had so many injuries over the last 2 or so years where he just hasn't been able to, I think, build himself up a good preseason and build him up, some really good high maintenance football that is consistent over the time. But we have to remember, in 2021, Jack Graham finished 2nd in the Tigers' best and fairest. 2nd in a team that won the premiership literally a year before. And in 2022, for the first half of the year, was playing some really, really good football. The issue is he's just gone downhill from there. But again, with a lot of injuries and a lot of things just not going his way, I very much think a guy like Andrew McQualter can get the best out of him again. And we know the best of Jack Graham is a bloke who finished 2nd in a team's best and fairest, who only won a premiership the year before. Again, if you're an Eagles fan, that has to be exciting to think that they're confident that they can get that back in him. Again, the controversial trade, we all of course know, did end up basically being a situation where the Eagles traded away pick 3 for really pick 12, Matt Owens and Liam Baker in the end. Again, that's controversial and a lot of people didn't like that trade. But at the end of the day, it really doesn't look that bad until you realize, they brought in some depth here. They traded away basically Jagger Smith. Look, Jagger Smith could be one of the best midfielders in the game and could be a star that plays alongside Harley Reid one day. But of course, it didn't happen. They traded him to Carlton, and he'll probably be a star that plays with Sam Walsh and Patrick Cripps one day. But the thing is, you traded away Jagger Smith for Bo Allen, Liam Baker, and Matt Owens. As soon as you say Bo Allen's name, you realize, hold on a second, that doesn't look too bad, especially considering he was a chance to go pick 7. So if you think about it, we basically traded away pick 3, Jagger Smith, for a guy who quite possibly could have gone pick 7 of Richmond in Bo Allen. That's only a 4, position difference. And Bo Allen could really come in and help this half back line, but also be a really good midfielder who can actually play some wing too. He has pushed up there at some stages. So it's really not that bad of an idea at all. And then Liam Baker, we know Liam Baker's been one of Richmond's best players for quite a while, and he's literally a two-time premiership player. He can come in and not only add to that midfield, but is also an elite half-back that people seem to forget about. He just didn't play half-back at Richmond because the only good position they had last year was their half-back line, so they needed him to sacrifice his game to go and play elsewhere. So I wouldn't be surprised if he plays a lot of half-back for West Coast throughout this most recent season. Then you also look at Matt Owies, where Matt Owies, at the end of the day, is one of the best small forwards in the game, who a lot of people rate, who I think was Carlton's third leading goal kicker. And he's a small forward who can kick over 30 to 35 goals for your team. So a lot of people hate on this trade period and whatnot that West Coast had, but realistically, they quite possibly brought in 6 new players to their round 1 team in Jack Graham, Bo Allen, Liam Baker, Matt Owies, Tom Gross, and Job Shanahan. Again, I think maybe 1 or 2 of those guys won't be in their round 1 team, but that's still 4 to 6 new players who you are probably going to immediately bring in that I think is pretty goddamn exciting for them. Again, something I haven't even talked about in this video as well is in 2025, they're looking at the big fish in Chad Warner. Was on Twitter and is by a guy by the name of Ryan Daniels, who I believe works at 7 News Perth, and he actually says, yes, Chad Warner played golf with West Coast Eagles CEO Dom Pike and West Coast Head of Strategy and Innovation Kieran Jack on Sunday. A few ex-workmates catching up, or a chat about the future. Chad's prize signature, a big watch for 2025. Now look, this is really concerning if you're a Sydney Swans fan, because, I mean, as Damien Barrett, I think, said it best, and even though a lot of people don't agree with what he says and would honestly quite frequently just call him a four-eyed man who likes to chat shit, but Damien Barrett said something really interesting that caught my attention previously, that was kind of like, you don't really lose 2 grand finals by the amount that they did within 2 years and not have some sort of ripple effect and some sort of drama attached to their club. Again, a lot of media experts and analysts out there have predicted not a downfall of the Sydney Swans, but definitely a step back from the great achievements they had last year due to, again, another thumping grand final loss. And look, this has started with Longmire, of course, leaving. I think Dom Pike, of course, left to West Coast as well. This is potentially could be turning into a ripple effect. Not that I think it will, and I think a lot of people are being really over dramatic, but there is still a chance now we are looking at a situation where a guy like Chad Warner maybe isn't at the club beyond 2025. Now, there's a lot of really interesting ways you can look at this. First of all, I think it does suck for Sydney, although I have heard arguments of people saying, well, it's not the worst thing for Sydney because they can get a bunch of first-round picks in and maybe turn that into really helping out their backline, which is, I think, something the Swans really do need, especially what we saw out of finals. It does look like they could add a player or two to that back line, while, again, their midfield is pretty stacked. And then there's just the other side of the coin where Sydney are arguably losing their best player, not only their best player, but their best young player, and a guy who could literally be a Brownlow contender pretty soon. So all of this is happening. It's really interesting. I've got a full video talking about the Chad Warner to West Coast situation where I highly recommend you guys potentially go and check that out. Again, it was uploaded a couple videos before this, so if I forget to link it down below, just go and check my channel. It was uploaded before this one, a couple of videos before. But again, Chad Warner could be a very likely chance to go to West Coast at this rate. But of course, if you haven't already, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for all the latest AFL content and news. Don't forget to comment your thoughts and opinions down below. Do you guys think West Coast had a really underrated and good draft, or do you guys think it wasn't that good? I'd very much like to know. Again, subscribe to my gaming channel, my IRL/vlog channel, and this one if you haven't already. Links for everything else will be put in the description down below. And I guess I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.